Hey everyone, I'm here today to take a look at my Character Options Doctor Who Dalek collection because I finally feel like it's complete now. And when I say complete, I don't mean that I've got every single Dalek they've released, but I've got every single design that I've wanted finally. Now this is the original Dalek design that came in the first Classic Daleks 3-pack around 2008, I think it was. And it's not my favourite design, but it is very important because it was the first ever design. Now at this point they were still quite short really. They had the kind of ball lights on the head rather than the flatter lights that they'll get later on. It's this silver colour with light blue orbs around the bottom there. It's very kind of 60s sci-fi look to it with how silver it is, which I do quite like. And this is before it had the kind of slats put around the torso section, if you can call it that. But still quite a nice design. It's a simple design and it definitely improves over the years, but it's very recognisably a Dalek, and that simplicity is what makes it so recognisable. Sometimes if you go over the top with details on things, it just becomes a bit of a visual mess and becomes less memorable and recognisable. I mean, you could just see the silhouette of this and you know it's a Dalek. But then in the same 3-pack that this came in, it also came with a grey Dalek from kind of the 80s era, and this Supreme Dalek. And I always felt like this was put in there as a substitute for the movie Daleks because they didn't have the rights to include movie Daleks, but along with the original Dalek design and the grey Daleks, I feel like the movie design was kind of the third most recognisable and memorable Dalek design of the time. But this is as close as they could get to putting one in there because this looks very similar to a movie Dalek because it's got the bigger base at the bottom to make it taller and these larger lights on the head, even though they're not the same as the lights on the movie Daleks. These are kind of upside down jam jars put on, but he's also got the flashlight on the front and a different neck piece, these thicker bits going around the neck there. But otherwise it's a basic Dalek design, the same gun and plunger. And all these Daleks have the same articulation. They roll, they've got kind of wheels on the bottom, and then they've got movable gun and plunger. But on quite a few of them, it's either the paint or the rubber on the ball there will stick, and it kind of jams them in one position. The newer ones aren't quite so bad, but the older ones would always stick. Like they're quite solidly stuck there now, so I'm not going to try and move them. But the head still moves around like so, and then this bit goes up and down, and this bit can sometimes quite easily come out as well. I think that's something that they improved upon as the years went by, so that would kind of click in there tighter. But this is quite a nice design. It was for the Supreme Dalek, that's why they made it bigger and painted it gold. I prefer the modern kind of Supreme Dalek, but because I'm such a big fan of the movie Daleks, I do quite like this design in general. I like the big bumpers on the bottom. And then that brings us to the movie Daleks, which have only just come out a few months ago. And I'm so glad that we finally got some 5-inch movie Daleks to go with the Character Options line, because I've always liked those Daleks from the 60s Peter Cushing movies made by Amicus Films. I love how vibrant and colourful they are, and just they've got a very kind of pulpy 60s sci-fi feel to them. But Character Options didn't have the rights to them. They only had the rights to the TV series Daleks, but they got around it because the movie Daleks did actually appear in the background of a TV episode once. I think it was an episode of The Chase, I'm not sure, but they were basically just used to fill out the Dalek ranks, and they were only there for a split second, but because they did appear in the TV show, that means that they are now able to be made as part of the Character Options Doctor Who line. I'm not sure if they could make more colours, because at the minute we only got these two in a 2-pack that are both blue. Now it was on a black and white episode, so I guess technically they could make any colour they wanted, but maybe they're only allowed to use the actual colour the Daleks were, even though you couldn't see the colour on screen at the time. But the blue ones are my favourite anyway. They're the most used ones because they were kind of the general Dalek soldiers. And then there was a red and a black one as the two leaders, which would be nice if we got a 2-pack of those in future as well, hopefully. Sadly they haven't included one with the claw hand though. They've both got the plungers, because I guess in the episode they both had the plungers, but it would have been nice if they had one with a plunger and one with a claw on the end, because that claw was kind of very recognisable as part of the movie Dalek design. But I suppose it wouldn't be too hard to customise that. But on these you can see here how the movement is a lot more fluid than on some of the older ones, and it doesn't tend to jam and stick. And so you can see how the gun and the plunges move around on those, and the heads move around the same way. These are in a lot tighter as well. They don't feel like they're going to fall out when you move them, which is nice. But I love this design. They've got the bumper on the bottom to make them taller, and the bigger lights on top to make them look a bit more threatening. Not quite as sort of small as that original design, but otherwise it is basically that original design. You can see it hasn't got the slats on the side that later designs would. It's just that on a bigger bumper, and then with bigger lights put on the top. That's got a bit of a different gun to the original gun design. It's got the more recognisable gun that has pretty much been used up until the late 80s at least. Now, I know the movies aren't in continuity with the TV show, but I've just always had a soft spot for them. I think they're quite fun films, especially because I'm probably more a fan of the Daleks than I am Doctor Who. So just having Dalek movies, even if it's not really in continuity and it gets all the Time Lord stuff, is completely missed out of it. But it's still just fun seeing the Daleks in those two films. And now move on to the grey Daleks. Now this is the one that came in the 3-pack with the Supreme and the original Dalek design. And this is, I'm always torn between the bronze modern Daleks and these grey ones as to which is my favourite. I'd kind of like to see the modern Dalek design, but in grey like this, in this kind of gunmetal grey, very warlike. And I think it was in Genesis of the Daleks we first see these, even though I always think of them as the 80s Daleks. They did appear in the 70s. But you can see there are kind of some slight variations on these three, and I like that with army builders. I like them to look almost like they're the same, but I still like them to have some unique differences, so it's not literally just the same toy over. You can see with this one it's got kind of ridges on the headlights there, whereas this one has the smooth lights. And then this one here has the ridges as well, but on that one the ridges are kind of a frosted colour, whereas this is a clear plastic. But also on this one you can see that gun arm is grey, whereas on these two it's more of a bronze colour. And this is one of the electronic Daleks, which are always fun.
You are an enemy of the Daleks. Exterminate. Maximum power. Fire. Daleks are the supreme beings in the universe.
And then to go along with the grey Daleks, I've got the black kind of commander Dalek. I'm not, was he a supreme Dalek or was he just like a commander? I tend to think of the black one as more of a commander rather than a supreme, but I think he might have actually been the supreme one from Remembrance of the Daleks, and I think he might have been in Revelation of the Daleks as well. But the black Daleks always look cool with those silver balls and detailing, and I love the kind of mesh that goes around the waist there, or the kind of shoulders I guess you could call them. I always think that looks really nice on these design Daleks too. It just makes them look a bit more militaristic and a bit more like war machines, rather than that original design which was more of a kind of sci-fi 60s pulpy robot. And then here are the Imperial Daleks. I've got one design which was from Revelation I think, and then this one is from Remembrance, where they had the kind of flatter lights on the dome there, you can see, compared to the more regular lights on that one. This is a bit more of a creamy colour as well. There is a bit of a difference with the white. And also this one has kind of flatter, smoother slats around the side there, which I don't really like. I think it looks a bit cheap. I much prefer these ones with the detailing on the rivets and the mesh. And this one here is electronic as well.
You are an enemy of the Daleks. Exterminate. Maximum power. Fire. Exterminate.
And then another Imperial, of course, is the Special Weapons Dalek, which is also electronic. It's a bit of a, it took me a while to get used to the Special Weapons Dalek because it was such a departure from your regular Daleks. I wasn't too keen to start off with, but I do quite like it now. I wouldn't want too many funky looking Daleks, but just one Special Weapons. It's quite cool, and it's got elements that we'll later see in the more modern Daleks, with a lot more of the rivets and things on show there, with that kind of dirty gold bronzed effect. And a huge cannon out the front. And the articulation is different on this one because he swivels at the waist there with the gun going up and down. Now, as well as this Imperial having the different lights on the head, to this one, the kind of flatter, slightly broader lights, and these sort of smoother slates around the edge rather than the mesh and the rivets and things of that one. The plunger is also different. It's got kind of notches in either side of it and it's fully gold, whereas on this one it's black and it doesn't have those notches, which you can just about see there on it. Now this is another colour scheme that I would like to see brought into modern Doctor Who with the modern bronze Dalek design, but in this white and gold colour scheme. And it's something that was used in the Doctor Who anime that was made about 10-12 years ago. It wasn't like an official anime, but it's on YouTube. And they did look really good, having that modern design in this colour scheme. And then lastly, for my classic Daleks, I've got Davros, who isn't technically a Dalek, but you've got to have Davros, haven't you? And I've always liked the original Davros performance and design. And I thought, was it Terry Malloy who played Davros quite a lot in the classic series? I love his performance with the voice, but when it comes to the physical performance, I always feel like that original Davros was the best, because I don't like Davros being able to move around too much with his upper body. He really looked like he was completely and utterly disabled, other than ever so slightly being able to move his arm just to flip a few switches on his control console. And I kind of feel like that suits his character more, that he is just that disabled, and that's why he's so insistent on creating the Daleks and wanting to gain power through them, because his body was just so totally destroyed. And there's something quite horrific about that as well. I don't like how in the modern series he's wiggling his arm about all over the place quite manically, and I mean, even opened his eyes in the last episode he was in, which doesn't make any sense, because his eyes were destroyed in the explosion and fused shut, so I don't think he could just open them if he fancied it. He just didn't for all those years, but whatever. So you've got to have that first ever Davros design, I feel. And now move on to the more modern era Daleks. Now this was the first design that was released for the modern era, and these aren't quite accurate to the show. They're a bit fat around the bottom there. The guns are a bit too thick as well. The eye stalks were too long, and they're basically just, the proportions were a bit out. But you've got this one here, which was just a regular Dalek. However, this front bit does come off and reveal the Khaled inside, and I do love that. I wish more of the Daleks would open up so you could see the little kind of Dalek mutant in there. I suppose it's not a Khaled, it is a Dalek, isn't it? But the little mutation with his control panel in front of him. Very cool. Nice little detail. Now I like how they took a few design elements from the movie Daleks and incorporated them into this more modern design. They gave them the thicker rim around the bottom to make them taller, and it also makes them glide a bit more elegantly as well.
Daleks have no concept of elegance.
Because the old series Daleks would kind of wobble around a bit. I feel like having a bigger rim around the bottom keeps them more stable when they're moving along the ground, but also the bigger lights on the dome there. And I think that's because by 2005, when the new series came out, the classic show hadn't been on air since the late 80s. There'd been a few repeats here and there, but not too many. And the Doctor Who that tended to be on TV the most during the 90s was the Peter Cushing movies. They were on all the time. I feel like it was a kind of Channel 4 thing on a Sunday afternoon. Those movies would always be on. So I think the movie Daleks became probably more recognisable to people by the mid-2000s than the classic design. So I think that might be why they incorporated some of the movie design elements into the newer Daleks. But I do love how they're made to look more metallic, basically, more like, you know, metal all welded together, and you've got the rivets and things there. They look tough, you know, they look less like flimsy metal or plastic like some of the older Daleks did, and more like they actually are solid steel designs. You can see the gun there is very thick, and the plunger arms are a little bit on the thick side as well. Just not quite accurate to the show. Not that I realised at the time. It was only when they released a more accurate version that you realise how inaccurate this version actually is. But I've got another one here, and this was a remote control one actually, and you can see the bronze colour on all of these is slightly different. None of them are exactly the same. This is kind of a bit of a deeper tone to it. It's also got a shorter plunger arm and a slightly different design on the gun there. But the head doesn't move on this one like it does on most of the Daleks because of the electronic feature. It's got kind of a sensor in there, and it came in a 2-pack with this Dalek, which at the time I thought was Dalek Sec, because I'd only seen that episode with Sec in once, and I just realised, I thought he was a black Dalek, so I thought this must be him. It was only later on that I realised that Sec didn't have the gold on actually, but this was later incorporated into a book and given the name Dalek X, which I liked, that they actually did incorporate this Dalek design. But with the sensors, when they came face to face, they would kind of communicate with each other. And I think I have to have the remote control to get them to do the interactive thing, which I don't have with me. I mean, God knows what happened to those. But it was still a fun feature. So I don't know if that's because they've just censored each other through that clear bit at the bottom there, but they will just keep talking like that. But once again, this is exactly the same design, just painted differently, so the head doesn't move or anything on that one. But then I've also got this Dalek here, which is almost the same, but he's got a claw arm instead of the plunger arm. But he's got the same gun as this Dalek, and he's got the head articulation as well, like him. But it's a much darker bronze to this one. And I like the claw because once again it felt like something that was being brought over from the Peter Cushing movies. But I don't think he actually uses the claw in the episode. I think it was like a laser cutter in the middle that he used to cut a door open. So it would be nice to see him return and actually use that claw. But as I said with the grey Daleks, it's nice having been able to sort of army build these bronze Daleks, but with them all having some slight differences to them. Now here's Dalek Second. He's a remote control one as well, but he doesn't have the sensor on him. So he doesn't interact with any of these ones because he doesn't have that sensor. But otherwise it is the same design, the same gun, the same shorter plunger. Now these all had really long eye stalks. I've actually taken them out and snipped a bit off the end and then put them back and glued back in to make them look a bit better, because the eye stalks were ridiculously long on these first releases of Daleks. But yeah, black Daleks, as I said earlier, they always look cool. I wish we'd see more of the black Daleks actually. Since Sec, they haven't really used a black Dalek in any significant way. I think he did appear again in the background of one episode, but he didn't particularly do anything. I feel like the Daleks in general haven't done anything much for a long time now, ever since the Matt Smith era onwards. I don't feel like they've really known what to do with the Daleks. We haven't had a decent Dalek story since the end of the Tennant era. Now here's the Supreme Dalek. I think this was the first time they kind of updated the body design to make it more accurate. They made it slimmer and gave him the thinner gun and plunger, the smaller eye stalk. This is a nice way to bring in the more colourful design elements from the movie Daleks, but still not to the point where it looks silly. Like he's red, but he's kind of a darker red, a deeper red, and it's got all these extra details to reinforce the vehicle of the Dalek, to make it, because he's the Supreme, he would have more armoured transport to protect him. He's got the extra light on the head there as well. Nice smooth movement of the head there. With the gold and the red. It's a pretty cool design. Once again, we haven't seen this kind of brought back either, which is a shame, other than sort of very briefly once. And now the more modern Davros, and I love this design, even though I thought his performance was a bit too energetic for my taste. I think it looks great, the prosthetics on the face. I like that they've incorporated the robot hand, where his original hand was blown off in, I think it was Revelation of the Daleks. But it's a really nice detail on the control console there as well. I love all these little buttons and things, and that orb, which I imagine would have like a little projection of a hologram, to basically use as a screen, all little switches and things. And then, like I say, with the face there, the prosthetics used look fantastic. And a couple more of the bronze Daleks, but these are the ones with the updated body type that look more accurate. Once again, you've got one that's a darker bronze than the other. I think this one's...
Multi-spectrum scanning now engaged. Surrender or be exterminated. Daleks conquer and destroy.
I wish they'd release more of these electronic ones. I think it was 2013 they came out. I remember skiving off work to go and pick them all up from Tesco's.
Exterminate! Exterminate! Exterminate!
But they do look good, and I'm kind of glad that there's a bit of a variation with the bronzing, just to make them stand out from each other a bit more. Also, you've got some that would have the rivets on the base there, and some that wouldn't, that was smooth. And these smooth ones tended to have more of a green colour to them, which I really didn't like. So I basically painted them all gunmetal grey to match the others. But I think this one might have been green as well, actually, and I painted both of those. I think that one I might have painted, and then some of them, that one was a gunmetal grey. But yeah, I think the rest, a lot of them were green on the bottom, which I just never really liked, so I kind of customised them myself. But yeah, at first glance, you'd think these all were exactly the same. So they make for a nice little army, but at the same time, it's kind of interesting that I can look at them and see different details on them all. And then have these two, which are both kind of B&M Bargains exclusives. And once again, this is that more modern Dalek design. But we've got this, they're both, I think they're both from the Big Finish audio stories. I'm not sure. One of them might not be. One of them might be from something else. But at least one of them is from Big Finish anyway. And if you haven't ever listened to the Big Finish Doctor Who stuff, you really should, because it's great. It's actually better than the TV show has been for quite a while now. I love some of the Big Finish stuff. But yeah, I've got these two Daleks here. I'm not so keen on the colour of this one, but it came with Sylvester McCoy, and I love Sylvester McCoy, and I think it was the movie outfit he had on, so I really want to get that. And it's always nice to get a few more Daleks anyway. But this Dalek here, he came with Paul McGann, who I also love, and I was really wanting to get the Dark Eyes Paul McGann. But this Dalek's really nice as well. I like it that he's blue, and once again it's bringing in the colours that are a bit recognisable and iconic from the movie, but it's toned down a bit so it doesn't look too silly. It's kind of a deeper blue, and I like the silver effect on there as well. I think the silver and blue works well together. This would be a nice one to see in the show, actually. But yeah, they just build up the army a little bit more. I think one of them might be a scientist or something, you know, a Dalek scientist, something like that. And then finally here I have my Special Weapons Dalek, which I modified for the modern line by basically just taking the base off and then putting the base of a modern Dalek on there that I got cheap because it was broken off of eBay. But I think because it's got the gold orbs and it's got all the rivets and things, it fits in well with the modern Daleks. It just, the only thing that stood out was that it had the thin, older base. So I think with a modern base part on the bottom there, he now fits in really well as a modern version of the Special Weapons Dalek. I mean, maybe I could have painted the rest of him bronze, but I kind of like him being white still to stand out from the others, because he is the Special Weapons Dalek. So, you know, if you've got the Supreme Daleks red and the Scientist Daleks blue, then this, you know, the Special Weapons one can be white so that he kind of stands out as more unique. I think it still fits in pretty well, because like I say, it's got the gold orbs like the new Daleks do, and all the rivets and things around the torso, the midsection there, like the modern Daleks do. And once again, going back to the anime that I mentioned earlier, because they had the Imperial Dalek colours on the modern Dalek designs, this does appear briefly with those modern Dalek designs, and that was kind of what gave me the idea to incorporate this into the modern line by giving it that base. And lastly here we have the most recent Dalek design, which didn't really go down too well. Like they really built it up, this big reveal of these new modern Daleks. There was like a white one, a blue one, an orange one, the red one. What was the other colour? Yellow, orange, blue, red, yellow. Was it something like that? And they came out and they just looked like Teletubbies, like Dalek Teletubbies coming out, and it really undermined how much they'd built up this big reveal that these were supposed to be threatening new Daleks. And the thing is though, this design looks good on a toy, and it looks good on novelty items. Like I've got an alarm clock here. It's bigger than your average Dalek toy, but it looks really cool. Like the alarm clock here, you press the bottom and it'll light up with the time there. It also projects the time out of the top there. You know, novelty items like that, I think this new design works well with, but actually in the show it just looked kind of silly because it looks too plasticky. You know, it doesn't look like a tough metal war machine like the modern Dalek design did. And you can once again see the influence of the movies on these more colourful Daleks, but as much as I love the colourful Daleks of the movies, I love them in the 60s movies. I don't feel like it's something that you can bring into the modern era like this. It doesn't translate. It's kind of like when Joel Schumacher tried to bring the 60s Batman into the modern day with his Batman and Robin movie. That kind of cheesy campiness. It's fun to watch as a 60s show, but if you try and bring that into the modern era, it just doesn't work. And it's the same with this. It just didn't look right in modern Doctor Who. It looked like, you know, Dalek Power Rangers coming out there and looked kind of silly. But it's kind of funny how quickly they dropped these from the show after that big build-up, and they were setting up a mystery around, you know, what were the different colour Daleks, what were their functions, what was special about them, and it never really got revealed other than in some guidebooks and things. But in the show, they just completely forget about it and quite quickly replace them with the old-style Daleks again. But you've got this bit on the back here which was intended to open up. That bit would slide down and a gun, like another weapon, would come out there, slide along this track here and then go to the front where, I don't know, you'd have a flamethrower or a missile launcher or something, but we never actually got to see that in the show. So there were some cool things about these Daleks that would have been interesting to have seen explored, even though I was kind of glad that they went back to the better Dalek designs. Part of me also would have liked them to at least done something with these designs first, you know, shown us what their original plans and intentions were. So that is my Dalek collection. Like I said, it's not a complete collection of every single Dalek that Character Options released, but it's every single design that I wanted. Finally, now that I've got that movie Dalek, which always felt like this kind of gaping chasm in my collection, that's finally been filled, and it does now feel like I have a complete collection of all the Daleks that I want. And like I say, I think these ones are the most iconic. These three are my favourites: the grey, the movie, and the bronze modern Daleks. But I mean, which Dalek design is your favourite? Are there any that I'm missing that you think I should get that are really good? That I've kind of missed out on and overlooked, because I actually overlooked these ones. I didn't realise the movie Daleks had been released until I saw someone else with one in a YouTube video, and I was like, where the hell did you get that from? And then I found out that these had been released, so I ended up having to pay like £10 or £15 extra more than I would have had I bought it at the time, but it was worth it to get it. So thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll catch you in the next video.